Oh yeah. I'm your host, Mr. U. Welcome back to the All-Purpose Pod for an all-purpose life, wherever you are today and however you listen to. They call me Mr. U, the podcast. Thank you again for making us a part of your morning, your day, and your week. We're your weekly mirror check before you go change the world, baby. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, the Twitter. Download, subscribe to our show wherever you enjoy your podcast. Thanks for listening, sharing us, and subscribing. Go change the world. Well, we're jumping into another live episode today. Call me Mr. U. I'm excited about today. I'm excited about our topic. I question whether I can get through the whole thing in one episode because we're talking about the greatest and worst sports rivalries. Definitely love your comments on our YouTube channel. So if you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn as well, Instagram or the Twitter or on YouTube, drop your comments on the YouTube channel. The link should be there for your use. Love to hear your thoughts on the greatest sports rivalries in your mind, in your opinion. I know bias is coming. Your bias is accepted here. So go ahead and share your thoughts. We got a lot to get into, but I want to talk about how I got to the point where we decided this episode would be good to talk rivalries. I was working on some content for another episode, and I came across some old data, so to speak, an old rivalry with the Red Sox and the Yankees. And there was a pitcher by the name of Pedro Martinez. You might remember him, name dropping a little bit, but well-known pitcher for the Red Sox, and he eventually moved on to play for the Mets for a while. But there was a chant that rung out from the New York Yankee fans saying, "Who's your daddy?" Every time Pedro went to the mound, they would say, "Who's your daddy?" And then he would hear it all the time. As a matter of fact, there was even some quotes from him recently that he still hears it everywhere he goes in public places. I don't care if at the airport, wherever he goes, he hears the same thing. "Who's your daddy?" all the time. So it's become a thing. But it made me think about some of the greatest sports rivalry, because definitely the Yankees and the Red Sox, that was a fantastic sports rivalry. It was legendary. It's not as much now because they don't have the same type of team makeup. It's a little bit different, but there's so much rich history there between the Yankees and the Red Sox. It made me think about sports rivalries as a whole. I said, I got a lot of context to use, so I want to hear you guys' thoughts. So jump in on our YouTube channel, hit us with a live comment. You can find a link, I believe, on Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter. Let us know what you think about that. But I'm wearing a hat, baby. Last night, the Yankees, it's not really a rivalry, but it's been considered one, the Yankees and the Dodgers, because of the Dodgers leaving Brooklyn, all those things. Not sure that makes it a real rivalry, but people seem to think so. But we won last night 4-1, and we are 36-25, about 6 games out, and we're in third place. A lot better than how it was looking in the past couple of weeks. So pretty excited about that. Everybody's trying to get healthy again, so you know what's going to happen. We're going to ball out. That's what's going to happen. But our poll question today is, what's the biggest rivalry in sports? So we're talking the best and the worst, but what's the biggest rivalry in sports? Jump into our poll question on social media platforms. Let us know what you think about that. But for me, I think a rivalry only works. It only works when the teams are on some kind of equal footing. The big brother picking on little brother for 100 meetings isn't very entertaining. No offense to anybody who's in that scenario as a little brother, but a rivalry has to have at least some kind of competition, some kind of equal footing. This is some products that they sell. They like carpets, placemats, banners. It's called A House Divided. I think it's so funny. My wife and I, every time we see it, we laugh about it. Even license plates now, A House Divided, where they have products, that for people who root for different teams. Like one person might root for Clemson in the house, and the other one for South Carolina, and they're known rivals, and they'll be in the same house and have a line between them, and they sell products like T-shirts and license plates and that kind of stuff. It's really funny, but these sports rivalries, they run real deep. I know you guys already recognize that because you probably can see it in your own lives, but these rivalries run really deep, and there's a lot of history. I'm going to try to get into it. I don't know if I'm going to make it through the whole episode, but there's so much rich history. It's not just about colors. It's not just about, this team and this team are on the same state fighting for relevance in their own home state. It's more than that. Some of these things go back to historic times where it's talking about politics, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why these rivalries even start. So I'm going to try to touch on some of that stuff and kind of bring a little bit more history to it. Hopefully I do a good job. It's so much information. I'm not really sure if I can pull it off, but hopefully I can. Let's talk a little bit about the in-state rivalries first, okay? So that's usually bragging rights for the best team in the state. And you see that in a couple of circles, like Iowa and Iowa State. It's not really the best example. 69 meetings total. I think Iowa has a 46-23 edge in that area. Got, like I said before, Clemson and USC, University of South Carolina. Now, because I live in the state, I have seen it constantly. I don't root for either one. Couldn't care less what they do. But it's really important to a lot of people who live out here. Either somebody's wearing orange and purple, or they're wearing garnet and black, or red and black. And it's a big deal for them. They had about 119 meetings between them. Clemson has a 72, 43, and 4 edge. Excuse me. So that's where they are. But it's obviously Clemson has the edge in that rivalry. So anytime that the Gamecocks win, it's a big deal for the other side of that rivalry. Maybe that's the best example. Those are just in-state examples. I can use Michigan and Michigan State. Everybody knows I'm a Michigan football fan, so everybody, we know that that's not really a real secret to those that know me. But it's always a battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. They had about 115 meetings between them. Michigan has a sizable edge, 72, 38, and 5. Whatever. Right. But, those are basically battling for the bragging rights to be the best team in the state. You got honorable mentions like Army and Navy. I mean, they showed them on TV. Maybe we saw them about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Army, Navy, and whatnot. They evenly matched, but it's not a fierce rivalry. It's nothing. There's no vitriol involved in it. There's no real tension involved. It's almost like a gentleman's game when Army and Navy play each other, which is, it's all right, but it's not fun for a rivalry. They had about 123 meetings between them, and Navy has a 62-54 and 7 edge. So it's a lot more of a tighter rivalry there, but that's totally fine there. But there's some non-competitive out-of-state rivalries too. I mean, if you try to Google that or do a little bit of research on rivalries, one you're going to see at the top of the list is Chicago and Green Bay. Now, I don't really know why that is. When I think about it, why is Chicago and Green Bay at the top of that list? Well, it's because they have about 100 years of history between them. And so they were considered bitter rivals. The reason why it's fallen off so much probably is because of proficiency at a quarterback position. It's probably one of the main reasons why, because Green Bay for a lot of this time had names like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. The Bears had, you get what I'm saying? So it's been a bit of a difference maker there. And the rivalry hasn't been as tight. The announcers try to make it that when they play each other in division, but it loses some of its oomph because the teams are not really on equal footing, talent-wise, and even record-wise. They're almost fighting for history more than anything else, as opposed to fighting for relevance where they are. But these rivalries, man, they've been in play for generations, and it's like it's not something that is just for the young folks. This goes on and it runs deep. I mean, sometimes when a child is born, the infants are born wearing the team colors, like literally. The first outfit they get is a team color. I mean, that's indoctrination at its finest or at its lowest, depending on how you see it. But they come out of the womb literally and being put into an outfit to represent their family's team, as to say you came out of the womb wearing these colors and seeing these colors, and that's what you're going to root for. It's like, wow, way to get them a chance, right? But it's a real thing. I'm joking about it, but it is serious to a lot of people. In some states, it's definitely serious. They take it personal. I mean, I've seen times where they have rivalry games and fights break out, and it gets real ugly. People are punching and hitting each other and kicking each other because of a football game. Rivalries run deep. And I don't know if that's the best side of sports or not. I'll let you decide if that's the best side of sports. But we're talking the best rivalries in sports today. And I love to hear what you think about which teams represent the fiercest rivalries, whether it be in-state or out-of-state. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well on our social media platforms. So let's jump in. All right, so one of the most competitive in-state examples that I can give you is going to be Alabama and Auburn, or what they call the Iron Bowl. one of the biggest games on the schedule for either one of these teams. I think Alabama has 18 natties, and I guess Auburn, they pretty much considered upset makers because whenever they get a chance to play Alabama, they play them tough, and they sometimes unseat them. They had about 87 games between them. I think the record is 49-37-1 for Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. And I mentioned Michigan and Michigan State. Those are always a fierce rivalry in state. Usually it's one team trying to play spoiler to the other and knock one out of championship contention, as usually what's happening when they're playing each other for the most part. But both teams take it really seriously. They can all be without a win, or they could be undefeated, and they'll play each other exactly the same way. So those rivalries really mean something in the state and to those kids that are on the field. It's a big deal for them. They live their life to play that game and to win it. So what's the biggest rivalry in sports in your opinion? Love to hear your thoughts. We have the link up on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, the Twitter. Let's go to Major League Baseball. Let's go ahead and start there, okay? Now, I was talking earlier about Boston and New York. Long, fabled rivalry. It goes back to 1901. They played each other 2,320 times. I want to make that clear so we have some perspective here. They played each other 2,320 times. New York has the edge by about 208 games. They have 1,257 wins over the Boston Red Sox and 14 ties. And it has some history here because it goes back to what is known as the curse of the Bambino. 1919. That's the year that this started. Since then, and the whole story goes like this, long story short. Babe Ruth was traded from one team to the other. And the team that traded him, which was the Boston Red Sox in this case, traded him to the New York Yankees. And since they did that, they had a title drought of 86 years. Perspective, 86 years. That's older than almost all of us, if not all of us, have been alive. That's how long it was that the Boston Red Sox didn't win a title. So they called it aptly the curse of the Bambino. Not sure how it's Babe Ruth's fault. He didn't trade himself. Somebody traded him. But during that span of time, this is what makes the rivalry kind of a lot richer and a lot deeper. During that span of time, the Bronx Bombers won 27 titles during that time. Early 2000s were probably arguably the greatest and most competitive ALCS that they had in Major League Baseball history. And that's around the time that Who's Your Daddy chant started with Pedro Martinez. It started in about 20 years ago. He's still hearing it today. So the rivalry is still deep and embedded in people's minds, especially baseball fans of either team. I can't forget it. It's that deep with me. I'm like, this is where I remember this like it was yesterday. Definitely. It might be the best rivalry in sports, period. I'll let you guys decide that in our comments. We can talk about it. Is Boston and New York the best rivalry in sports? I'm talking about across the board in every sport. Is the Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees rivalry the best in sports, period? That you guys jump in on that one. Got some comments starting to roll in already. My man Herb was dropping some comments, dropping some knowledge today. He said, plus in the South, we don't have much to do, so football is king. Iron Bowl is huge. All right, now, there's nothing to do in the South but play football, huh? Copy that. I know in Texas, that's definitely a thing. Football is everything. People are born and raised literally on football. It runs the state, probably powers the economy as well. Football is a big deal, but the Iron Bowl is huge. I got a good friend of mine who's a big Auburn fan. He lives in angst most of the time because Alabama is their division rival, and usually Auburn is not fighting for a championship. No offense, bro. You know I love you. He deals with that a lot. So the Iron Bowl to him is on his calendar he'll tell you this, and I don't want to throw shade his way. He does a lot of important things for the community, and he is important in a lot of ways to a lot of people. But when that game is on, he is incognito. He's persona non grata. You can't talk to him. You can't call him. You can text him if you got a flat tire. He'll come back and he'll help you out tomorrow. He's not going to help you out today. When the Iron Bowl is on, he is locked in front of the television with his jersey on, and he don't hear nothing and he don't see nothing but that game. If you're listening, you know I love you, bro. But that is facts. So back to the Boston-New York rivalry. I think it's probably up there at the top, at least in the top 3 of sports rivalries. And there's a lot of reasons for this. The whole bunch of stuff that went on during that time that made it really deep. Do you guys remember Don Zimmer, 72-year-old coach of the Yankees, tried to spear Pedro Martinez in 2003? He was Roman Reigns or something, trying to spear him. He was Edge from wrestling, trying to spear Pedro Martinez. It was sad, but it shows you how different a 72-year-old man left his seat in the box, came running out onto the field and charged the mound at an opposing pitcher with the intent to spear him. These rivalries are for real. It makes people do crazy things. Johnny Damon, another name that's a real big part of that rivalry. They won the World Series in 2004 after an 86-year drought, which was probably one of the greatest sports victories in Boston history, excluding the Celtics in their heyday, of course. But after 86 years, they won the World Series in 2004. Then he left the Red Sox. This guy is a hometown hero now. Left the Red Sox to go play for the Yankees, their division rival, and won a World Series day in 2009. I don't know if Damon can even walk around in Boston anymore. I mean, these rivalries get so deep and they get so powerful and so intense. Like I said, we gotta check ourselves, man. It makes you do crazy things. It makes you think crazy stuff. It's like this is beyond the pale. People are really getting really serious about these. I mean, there's news I probably can share about this, but I probably won't do that today. But there's just so much that we'll talk about it as we go on a little bit, because some of the rivalries get physical and they get intense. And it's like, wow, this is more than just the heat of the moment. This is deep. A-Rod and Jason Varitek, they squared up after the infamous ball slap incident in 2004 in ALCS. I mean, there's so many little tidbits about Boston and New York that make that rivalry so great. So love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Boston and New York is the #1 sports rivalry in all the sports? That means college football, basketball, the NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey. Is it the #1 rivalry? Love to hear your thoughts on that one. I guess I'll give an honorable mention to the Giants and the Dodgers, because I know that some fans out there are going to say, well, what about that team? What about this rivalry? No question. It's a fantastic rivalry. The Giants, and the Dodgers both made moves from the New York area to the West Coast, and they had about 2,559 head-to-heads, with San Fran winning more than half of those, about 1,274, I think it is. They got fans out there fighting like they're in a boxing ring or something, getting repeatedly hospitalized during games due to all the fighting. That's how intense that rivalry is. You think Giants and Dodgers are #1? Top 3, top 5? What do you think about that? I mean, some of the fiercest rivalries are almost 100 years old or more. And it's just proof that we're really good at holding grudges. We're a little bit too good at it. How about college football? This is the way it gets crazy, and I know it. I know Major League Baseball has its incidents, and you hear a lot about those, probably a lot more back in the past than now. But college baseball, it's a different bird. We talked about the Iron Bowl and some things, but it's different. It hits different than most rivalries. We'll talk about some more, but as we get into the NFL and NBA, if we can fit the time in. But with college football, I love the comment from my buddy saying, my mom doesn't call me during football games. She knows. I love that. Let's talk about Michigan and OSU. Now, I want to stay there for a minute, not because I'm a Michigan fan. I'm proud of it. Go Blue, baby. Hail to the victors. I ain't gonna run from that. But the game, I don't care where Michigan is in their season. Doesn't matter where OSU is in their season. Doesn't matter. Like I said, they can be undefeated or they can have 0 wins. When this game happens, usually around Thanksgiving weekend, when the game is on, and it's a big deal to both cities. It's a big deal to both fan bases and franchises. It's a big deal. It's been 50 years since the year 1897, man. And you guys born then? I don't think so. But Michigan has a 60-51 edge. But the last 2 years have been their best under Harbaugh's tutelage. But this rivalry is so embedded to me for a lot of reasons. Maybe if it's not the best, but it's one of the best. Even during the COVID year, Michigan canceled a game that Ohio State needed to play to be eligible for the Big Ten title game. I know anybody that's a Buckeyes fan or Wolverine fan, they remember this pretty vividly. It happened during the COVID year. I think it was 2020. But they canceled a game that the Buckeyes needed to be eligible for the Big Ten title game, but they canceled it. That was the first time since 1917 that this game was not played. So, there was no shortage of tension. It was even more intense than what it already is. I mean, in short, man, this rivalry has deep roots. Nobody's played more games than these guys. Between them, they have 19 national titles, 175 All-Americans, 82 conference championships, and 10 Heismans. I'll say it again for those in the back. 19 national titles, 175 All-Americans, 82 conference championships, and 10 Heismans. This, for the history buffs, this rivalry goes all the way back to the early 1800s, if you can believe that. Research the Toledo War. Research the Toledo War. This started with that. This wasn't even about football. It was about, to some degree, politics. And this rivalry came from that. And it just goes to show you that, to some people, sports is everything. And you can see why. It's deeply rooted into our culture. People, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. There's some folks that would love to not have sports, but it's not realistic. Imagine a society without sports. I don't think I can. It goes back to almost the dawn of time. Sporting matches and feats of strength and gamesmanship. It goes back a lot further than the 1900s. This is arguably one of the biggest games in history as far as college football goes, but as far as this rivalry, I mean, it has so many layers to it. I mean, this team played in 2006. Whew. That's the year that Coach Bo Schembechler died of a heart attack right before the game. And both teams were undefeated, ranked number 1 and number 2, respectively. This game had implications, and most times it does. So what do you think about the OSU-Michigan rivalry? Any thoughts and opinions about that? You want to share with us? Go ahead and drop your comments. You know where, right on our YouTube channel. They call me Mr. U. Check us out there. In the NBA, I'm gonna jump from college football into the NBA. Number 1 on the list of rivalries, and I think that even this year, as we head into the playoffs, a lot of people wanted to have a rerun of this particular rivalry in the NBA final. I didn't want that. I had different aspirations. I wanted my Knicks to be in the finals, but that didn't work out thanks to the Miami Heat, who are 1-1 with the Denver Nuggets right now in the conference, in the NBA finals now. Yeah. But one of the biggest rivalries you see in the NBA, and you see it at the top of most lists, is Boston and LA. I know you think your team is hot, but Boston and LA seem to be the one that's always there. Between them, 17 titles, 12 head-to-head finals matchups from the 60s all the way to the 1980s. So they've been going at it head-to-head for a long time. Names like Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Elgin Baylor. Excuse me, the list goes on and on. They're part of a historic dynasty. During that time also, if you do a little research on that, you'll see that there was a big racial component in this rivalry. And I don't know where it came from per se, but I know that Larry Bird was considered the great white hope. I don't know why he got that title or where that came from. I believe that Los Angeles was a predominantly African-American team, but I don't really get exactly why the racial component was such a big deal. I mean, to me, it was just Magic versus Bird. I never really even thought about the fact that, there was a racial divide in that. It was just three-point shooting specialist Larry Bird going against the point guard of the century in Magic Johnson at the time. I mean, that's how I saw it. The games were intriguing to me. I mean, see them on national television. Big part of my childhood. Historic rivalry. Do you agree that Boston and LA should have the number one spot in that regard? Love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm pretty partial to the 1990s version of the NBA. I mean, I remember the epic battle between Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning. I mean, I'm pretty sure that my blood pressure was up at an all-time high when these games happened. I'm pretty sure because it was intense for me to watch them go at it. I know that they have a mentor-mentee relationship, but on that court, it was fierce, man. I mean, these guys would be fighting and slugging each other. I mean, they're best friends. Or at least really, really good friends. You and the Mourning were tight. When they got on that court, they were like different people. I think that's what happens when you have a rivalry that spans so many generations and years and centuries and goes back so far. So much of the roar, the crowd, and the intensity and the build-up to these games, the people change. They become different animals, so to speak. And it says a lot. I mean, I have to really just stop and pause, seriously. Stop and pause and think about what I'm going to say before I say it, especially in the social media realm, because it's so easy to say, you know what? Oh, Ohio State sucks, or Dallas sucks, or Philly. I mean, all of rivalries that we have, for me being with the New York sports fandom, it's so easy to go that route and say those things. We don't even have to have facts to back it up. We can just say that, and we think it's accepted, and we just turn into different people sometimes. So I just, this is just a self-check for me. Maybe it's a blessing to you. I hope it is. It wouldn't hurt us just kind of step back just for a second and just think about what we're saying before we say it. Think about that. I know we got our sports team that we love, and our mama loved them, and grandma loved them, and grandpappy loved them too. I get it. But it wouldn't hurt us to kind of stop back and just reflect. Okay, first off, we don't play for the team. Number one, we don't play for, nor are we employed by the team. We're not stockholders in the team just because we're season ticket holders. Doesn't give us the right to say whatever we want, throw whatever we want at people, curse people, saying, I wish your son was dead. We don't get a chance. We don't get the opportunity to. We don't have the right to say those things. I know we're in America, but we really shouldn't be saying that. We have free speech, yes, but we shouldn't be using our free speech to do that to people, to assault people. These rivalries have that kind of edge to them because a lot of times that's what we see. That's what happens. I mean, Boston got a little bit of a history now. We don't talk about it a lot nowadays, but they had a history of doing some stuff. We talk about Philly in the NFL as one of the worst fan bases because of what they do and say to opposing players, how they cheer for people to be injured. Hopefully we had time to get into that one. But it gets ugly. I just wanted to just kind of take a pause and just think about that before we move forward. But the Knicks and the Heat rivalry was intense. I mean, for me, I would love to go back to the 1990s version of the NBA. There was a channel I can watch where I can watch NBA from that era. I wouldn't watch any of the current product probably. I loved it that much. It was that impactful for me. Excuse me. It was that impactful for me. That was the NBA at its finest. I asked that poll question on our Twitter page, and people told me, "Oh, the '60s were the greatest." I'm like, the '60s, dude. What are you talking about? I heard the '70s and the '80s. I don't know what they're talking about though. I was there and I watched it, but the '80s didn't hit me. It hit different than the '90s for me. It hit different. That wasn't. Those guys were players, man. You got guys out here, stars flopping and faking like somebody's hitting them so they can get a call. Desperation, it seems like. In the '90s, they just fought and gutted out. They hit each other. They tripped each other up. Bill Lane beer. They elbowed each other. It was intense. They were fighting. They were on the street. Street balling. And I loved every minute of it. The '90s were excellent. The NBA needs that kind of rivalry right now. I still can't talk about the Michael Jordan-led Bulls and the Knicks rivalry without getting intense about it. I still haven't forgiven Scottie Pippen for that dunk on Patrick Ewing. I still haven't forgotten about that, Scottie. I ain't forget about that. Pistons and the Bulls. I mean, you got Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Vinny the Microwave, Bill Lane Beer. I'm forgetting the other guy in the starting five. That one's going to haunt me. Anywho, but the heat between Isaiah Thomas and Michael Jordan was nuclear. Every game was intense. It was nuts. That's where the Jordan rules came from. And you can't forget the Lakers and the Spurs. So we even say the Warriors and the Cavs. I'm not sure it's one of the best rivalries, but LeBron fans probably would consider that one of the tops. Let's jump lastly into the NFL. This is where I get excited too because I love the NFL. So it's being suggested that we discuss the Oakland or Las Vegas rivalry with Kansas City. I guess we'll call it an honorable mention because I don't know if that's really a current rivalry. It started in 1960. I'm not sure that Las Vegas has the kind of intense fandom that Oakland had. This rivalry might be the most intense of them all. I mean, the Black Hole was notorious, and they intensely loved their Raiders. My father was a member of the Black Hole when he was alive. He was a diehard fan, so I know how much he hated the Chiefs. So it was a intense rivalry, and there was a lot of vitriol to go with it. On the field, there was a lot of hard hits, harder than normal maybe, a lot more emotion. Anybody that can remember that era, love to hear your thoughts, either on YouTube or on social media platforms, even after the show. Love to talk more about that with you. Cleveland and Pittsburgh, the Browns and the Steelers. I'm going to read it. I can't forget the words of Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm going to read this out today. He said, I think they're still the same Browns team that I play every year. I think they're nameless gray faces. They have a couple good players on their team, but at the end of the day, I don't know. The Browns is the Browns. I got a lot of Browns fans on our Twitter page, and I know that if they hear this, they may not be excited about it. I'm going to read it again. I don't want them to miss what Juju said. I know it was a while ago, but I just want to refresh their memory for them. Okay? We said, I think they're still the same Browns teams I play every year. I think they're nameless gray faces. They have a couple of good players on their team, but at the end of the day, I don't know. The Browns is the Browns. That's Juju Smith-Schuster, who was formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now he plays with the Kansas City Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. But that rivalry was intense. I remember all the times that when they played on a national scale, because that's where I would get a chance to see it more. It was intense, man. I mean, the hits and the pushing and shoving after the play and the fist fights. These teams hated each other. I'm not even sure where it started, but they are division rivals, so it kind of goes with the territory to some degree. But the rivalries are intense. Any Cleveland fans out there that want to chime in? Any Steelers fans that have any thoughts about the rivalry? Love to hear from you guys there. Pittsburgh and Baltimore, another one. Usually always a defensive battle, usually. Who remembers Terrell Suggs and Hines Ward and the Bounty? You guys remember that one? Flacco and Big Ben. These guys will go out there even if they were injured. Pittsburgh always has a rivalry with somebody. I mean, besides Cleveland, the Browns, and beside the Baltimore Ravens, they also had one with the Bengals, which is probably a little bit more prevalent now. But that hit on Antonio Brown by Vontaze Burfict, that's proof. If you remember that one, check it out. Look it back up again. It's proof that NFL rivalries can be intense and they can be dangerous. If you can recall a game where somebody didn't leave injured when Cincinnati played Pittsburgh, I'd love to hear about it. I can't recall one game in recent history where somebody wasn't rolled out. And people might say, oh, that's just football, but no. Check it out. There was a lot more injuries when the Steelers played the Bengals than most any other time. And Vontaze Burfict was behind a lot of those situations. Not to put shade on the man's name, but you were connected to a lot of that. Not the only one, but there was a lot of injuries that happened during these two rivalries. This is what, unfortunately, rivalries look like. People get hurt. People get injured. People's careers get cut short. All for the sake of fighting for the colors, fighting for the team, fighting for the legacy and the history. There's always a cost. I mean, I was at a playoff game for my team. We were playing a team that wasn't even our rival. We went on to win a Super Bowl championship, but we were playing a team that wasn't even our rival. And the fights, the injuries, people getting medical care, and their insurance is starting to kick in because they fought at a football game that they went to go root for their team for. The rivalries in the National League National Football League. I don't even know where I'm at. But Dallas, Philly, and Washington. It's amazing that the Giants were left out of the equation for some of these. Like, we ain't a part of this. Okay, that's what we're doing now. It's kind of weird and hurtful if we weren't included, but whatever. But the NFC East has been known for their rivalries between them. In fact, it started over a long time ago. I think somewhere in, I don't know what year it was. You guys can help me out with that if you know, but it started out over ownership of a song and blackmail to get approval for an NFL franchise. All this stuff happened through the NFC East. The body bag game in 1990. That game was intense. And why it was significant, and you can look up the body bag game from 1990, and you can see why it's intense. Because every quarterback on the roster got knocked out of the game. 9 players total were injured during the body bag game. And don't forget Bounty Bowl, with the Eagles allegedly putting a bounty on Dallas players. Jimmy Johnson was not a happy camper. But the Bounty Bowl, the body bag game, rivalry starting because of the ownership of a song. Blackmail for approving an NFL franchise. This all happened. This is all part of the rivalry between Dallas and Philly and Washington. Lastly, I'll talk about Dallas and San Fran, the Niners, real quick. Pretty much a really even rivalry. 19-19 tied all time. 15 NFC championships between them and Super Bowl titles. The 49ers had the last 2 of both for those. 2012 and 2019, meaning that Dallas hadn't had a championship in a while. And they also have a 2-win streak, the Niners do, one including the catch, which is pretty famous. They play once every 3 years, so it's kind of hard to make it a rivalry, but somehow it's voted number 1. Out of all the rivalries in the 1990s, in the 90s era, they're the number 1 rivalry of all of those. What did we learn today? What did you learn from this? You love your team and you wear the colors proudly. But are you willing to do or say anything for the sake of team? We can go some places with this one, but just something to think about. I love talking football and basketball and baseball. I love sports. But just think about it for a second. Think about it for a second. What's it worth really? A lot of these rivalries go back 100 years. Usually a tiff between two people who aren't even here. They may have generations that are watching the games. Maybe they're involved with the team in some way, in ownership. But the people who started the rivalry aren't even here anymore. And the cause is still being fighted for, as if it's still relevant when it started so many years ago. It's just something to think about. It's just perspective. Because if you could look at this blindly and not recognize that maybe it's not worth doing some things you would do or saying some things you would say, it's concerning. It's concerning. My boy Raj says Miami and Buffalo. That is becoming a very huge rivalry, Raj. Love the point there. It's becoming huge right now, especially because they're both playing well. I think that's important because when they weren't playing well, nobody was talking about them. It was the Pats and everybody else. But I have mentioned that one. Good call in that one, Raj. Appreciate the insight there, man. Miami and Buffalo. At this point, they're kind of fighting for the top spot in the AFC East. Jets fans may disagree, but you haven't done it yet, baby. You got guys on paper. You got A-Raj. I totally understand, but you haven't done it yet. You got to do it first. It's not automatic. Just saying. But the rivalry situation, love to hear your thoughts on that as we jump off air and move back into the social media realm. Love to hear your thoughts on our Facebook platforms, on Instagram, or of course, and most notably on the Twitter. Let us know what you think about sports podcast. Yeah. The fun of doing something live, right? That's what this is. Sports rivalries. Love to hear your thoughts on those. Which one's your favorite? Which is the best? Which one do you think is the worst sports rivalry? Love to hear your thoughts on that. So thank you again for joining us in the All-Purpose Pod for an all-purpose life, wherever you are today. And however you listen to the Call Me Mr. You. Thanks for making us a part of your morning, your day, and your week with your weekly mirror check before you go change the world. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the Twitter. Download or subscribe to our show wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Thank you for listening. Thanks for sharing us. And thank you for subscribing. Go change the world. We love you guys. See you soon. Coach out.